about relationship. My relationship with technology is dubious at the best of times, so of course my PowerPoint presentation is incompatible with the computer. But I did think that might be the conflict because it's all about connecting with you. So let's have a relationship with the audience instead. And certainly my relationship with people is far better, as was wonderfully expressed already this morning on the journey here. I was late, running late, got the train by several microseconds, but didn't get a ticket. And in the UK, that's not a good plan. I thought, it's okay, there'll be a conductor on the train, and a conductor, get to the barrier, that will shut, can't sneak through or anything. So I go up to the ticket guy and go, I wasn't expecting a big argument or a huge fine, and he just went to me through. Excellent result. So good relationship. And then randomly had got lost trying to find my way here. I don't know the directions if anyone else found this, but I wasn't sure where that Sainsbury's was that we were meant to be looking for. So I found one quite a way up the street. Did finally find Sainsbury's, but it wasn't connected to the Wellesley Hotel. So I was lost around the back streets, and this woman, randomly, just came up to me and said, are you looking for the Wellesley Hotel? I was like, how random is that? I said, yes, I am. She was nothing connected to this Feng Shui conference. So again, thank you. So this is relationship. So what is relationship? And in our 3D world that we all inhabit, everything's about relationship. We only really understand hot in relation to cold, light in relation to dark, tall in relationship to short. So we're always living in this world of relativity and understanding everything through that way. So if we look at the dictionary definition of relationship, it's about making a connection. How do we connect? What is that connection between things that creates that relationship? So what is the relationship to tall and short, and what is that space in between? So we're all looking for these connections, and even our human bodies, you know, basically we are just a bunch of cells at that basic level. So how do we give form? Because all of our community of cells is in relationship or in connection with one another. And how do we make these connections? We make these connections through our stories. Now, humans have a very complex psychological narrative that creates that story and how we relate. But everything relates in that way. Everything is about the story, even the cells in our body. Now, their narrative is maybe a little bit more simple. It's like one cell saying, hey, I've got some oxygen, you've got some carbon dioxide, should we get together, have a bit of an exchange, should we relate? You know, our blood pressure goes up, some other cell says, oh, let's bring that down, let's try and bring it into balance. And it's the same process. All of our cells in our body are constantly coming into this balance and harmonization of a homeostatic state. Exactly the same way that we work with our homes. And how does this relate to Feng Shui? Because for me, it's all about relationship. As William Morris so beautifully put, home is metaphor of the self. I think it's one of those, that key phrase that is as true today as it ever was and will remain true. So it is like, what is the story? Because metaphor is story. It is the narrative. So what is the relationship between your personal narrative and the narrative or story of your home? And as consultants, I think sometimes we can go down the rabbit hole, can't we? Because Feng Shui is incredibly complex. There's lots of calculations, there's lots of fascinating topics and side branches we can go and investigate. I've been doing some fantastic continuing work with Richard Ashworth at the moment on Bar Z. If anyone's interested in developing their Bar Z relationship, I thoroughly recommend him. So we've had some wonderful metaphysical discussions because we go off tangent all the time in the lessons. But if you keep him on track, it's excellent. But in terms of that relationship and what is there, so we can get a little bit lost sometimes. And we start going down the rabbit hole of all these different calculations and specializations. And for me, it's like sometimes we need to just bring ourselves back and remind ourselves first of what our relationship is to the components, the basic components of Feng Shui. Simon started to talk about this beautifully this morning. He calls it observational reality, I call it story. Same but different. And basically, so that relationship with Qi, when did you last consider, as a practitioner or as somebody in your own space, what that relationship with Qi is? We can get very locked down into, that's what Qi is, that's what it means, that's what it is. But when did you last consider your relationship to it, that invisible energy that is constantly swimming around us that we're engaged in. When did you last consider, as you walk through your front door, how does the chi feel? Have you actually done a chi assessment of your own home and walking in? Because one of the spaces that I love to work with in homes is that liminal space, doorways. They're threshold points. And doorways can be used in all sorts of ways. I really enjoy, because if you notice and you become aware of the chi, walking from the bathroom to the kitchen or to the bedroom or to the living room, through that threshold point, they take you. That's why in sort of traditional Feng Shui, they don't like doors opposite each other, because you're basically meeting someone in a state change. As you move from one doorway or one space into another through that liminal space, that threshold point, there can cause a clashing energy from somebody. If you're meeting somebody that may be in a different state, coming from a different environment in the room. So just become aware in your own home, as you walk through that liminal space, that doorway, that threshold point, from one space into another. What's the quality of chi? How does it change? How does that sense of energy shift? How does it become? What is it feeling like? What is the emotion that it gives rise to? How do you feel in your bedroom compared to how you feel in your kitchen or in the living room? Which is the room that you feel most comfortable in, or you don't really want to go into because it feels a bit cold? What's the quality? Get into that feeling. What is it? Can you name it? Is there an emotion attached to that? What is that sense of being that allows that rise of relationship, your own relationship to your space and each room within your space? And if we start to break down that overarching chi field, then we come into the relationship of yin and yang, because it breaks down into that more active, masculine, outward energy of yang and that more inward, reflective energy of yin. And again, if you walk around your own space, when did you last look? When did you last make a yin-yang assessment of your own homes? Because if we know where our current state is and our relationship with our own space is, then it is far easier to walk into a client's space and feel something other than. To know your own kind of control point, if you like. And also these relationships, as we know, because Feng Shui is not a static practice, although many people would like to believe it might be. Oh, I've done my Feng Shui. It's over now. And as Simon beautifully said, move things around all the time. It doesn't have to be the big things, it's the small things. It is the cushions and the vase of flowers, or the shift of moving the furniture a bit, or adding a little bit of something different for each season. That movement of chi, but your relationship also changes all the time. And how do we make these relationships within ourselves? They're not static, are they? And we work with the nature of that in terms that it gets deeper over time, often. And so it becomes more subtle. So it is worth revisiting these very basic concepts to see how your relationship has changed over the years in your practice, with what you've learned, with what new understanding, new insights. I work shamanically with a mesa, like an open altar. It's a very, very basic concept in a sense. It's the sort of, where they use 5 directions because they consider the center, the axis mundi in the Pachacuti tradition. And I still, I've been working with that since 92. And still I can sit in front of that mesa and see a brand new inside that I've just never seen before, endlessly, endlessly giving. Because these fundamental building blocks of life are the essence of what creates all of life. And so that curiosity, that engagement with the dialogue, the narrative, the story of what your relationship is with that energy should be endlessly fascinating. Because this is it. So in order to really bring that passion to your work and that real curiosity, is re-engage with that curiosity with yourself and your own space. So go and do a chi assessment and a yin and yang assessment. Does this room feel more yin, or is it more yin? Am I feeling more active in here, or do I want to kind of retreat and become still? Is my bedroom maybe too activated, or my kitchen not sort of in the right balance of that situation? And then after that, of course, the yin and yang break down into the 5 transformations. And of course, this is a brilliant example of how everything is about relationship. It's not about the static sense of something. Something is not, as I say, is not a truth. It's constantly moving, it's constantly in motion. And the 5 transformations, we don't talk about them as the elements. We don't say it's metal. We're interested in the relationship between metal and wood, or fire, or water, or earth. We're not interested necessarily in it as one state. It's what's the relationship between them. So again, in terms of one of the ways I like to investigate this is every now and again I go on a little walk through the forest in my mind. I also live in the forest, so I do it for real too. And I just curious, it's a beautiful sunny day, so I'm feeling the warmth of that wonderful fire energy dappling through the leaves. And as I enter the forest, it's cooler. And I'm becoming aware of these amazing beings around me, these standing people, these wonderful tall trees, how they reach up into the air and the light, but they also have their roots deep into the earth. And as those roots grow deep into the earth, how do they disrupt that element? How do they work with the earth? And then, because I'm very good at sort of bushcraft and survival, I happen to be carrying an axe. It was getting a bit chilly as the night draws in. And so I find some dead wood and chop it up, right, and gather that. But what's the quality of that dead wood compared to the living wood, where the sap is not rising in the same way because it's always disappeared? And I build that fire, and I always love to think of fire because this is actually what it is. It's basically you're burning liquid sunshine. Think about it, it's true. That's how it gets through its photosynthesis and all the rest of it. So you're warming yourself through that wonderful liquid sunshine of that fire that is around the thing. And then suddenly you notice on the horizon the clouds are beginning to gather and come in, and it's getting a little bit darker in your forest and all the rest of it. And out of nowhere there is a thunderstorm, and the rain comes crashing down. And how does the rain and the element of water change the smell of the forest? From the dry, crispy leaves to that sodden dampness and that smell of moss. What does it do to your fire that you've built? Is there enough warmth and power in the fire to rise through the rain, or does it dampen it and create the steam? And then noticing how, as the wood burns out and becomes ash, that it goes back into the earth and feeds the earth, and so the cycle begins. And just becoming aware. Take yourself on these little visualizations, or when you are out in nature and you're walking in the forest, where can you notice the 5 transformations? How do you notice their interaction with one another and how they relate and have that conversation with each other? Also, we've come down through our 5 transformations, and then we come into the trigrams of the Bagua and the family relationships, and those different family relationships. Where do you fit in your family? Are your mum and dad still alive? Are you the eldest or the youngest or the middle child of either gender? Just being aware of where your control point is, because it will inform how you relate with your clients to a degree. How that if you've got no father, perhaps you get a lot of consultations where there's something around that energy, because there is something around your story that attracts a related narrative into your life, because we do like stories that relate to our story. How do we connect as human beings? We want somebody, we're telling somebody our story, and this is great when we're working with clients as well, to be really aware. You don't go straight into a stranger and go, well, when I was 3, my dad was an alcoholic and then he left and my wife, you go, hi. My name is, and may give some general statement. Lovely weather today. It's really generalized. We start at that big picture level, and then we come down and wind our way through into the detail. And this is what gives depth to the consultation. This is what gets depth to your relationship with the home. But if we don't start at that higher level, we can be too focused on this tiny bit here and miss the whole story that's going on out there. So becoming aware of those family relationships and those dynamics within the trigrams and how they relate to the different elements, and just periodically revisiting this material. We've all learnt it. Some of us are very experienced in this room. We've learnt it years ago. Some of you are completely new, in which case this is a wonderful exploration to really start this investigation, this building of this relationship. But for those of us that have been practicing a while, to remember to sometimes revisit these concepts. To go, what's my relationship with Qi now? What have I learned since I last looked at this? How is my understanding of the 5 transformations or the family relationships and the dynamics that turn up in houses, how has it shifted? How has it changed? Have I got new insights? Have I got new understanding of this? What's mine? So now when you go to your consultation, you kind of know where you are. And then it's much easier when you step into your client's world to understand the difference, to understand that bridge you're crossing of knowing what's yours and what's theirs, in that sort of description of how those things go together. So with our client consultation, when we're getting into the story of that, again, start with the big picture. Start from the very first contact of how you build that relationship. I'm sure, well, I certainly, because sort of many years of experience, you can tell kind of what the basis of that consultation, normally I find from the first email. Like, you'll get the kind of email that is like, how much does it cost? I'm sure you've all had them, right? They don't ask what your qualifications are, what you're going to do for the value, for the money, it's just how much does it cost? You know, and then you'll get the other end of that spectrum where there'll be reams of history. They've not met you, there's no relationship, and again, this is like, you can tell. So the first person, you can choose to interact with them in a different way. It's like, okay, this person's interested in value. They want to know, right? Money's important to them. They probably, if they're asking the first question, it's the only question, they probably haven't got a huge budget to spend on this, so they want to know they're going to get good value for money. So you can start to relate to your client where they're at in their story. And that narrative will help you build that relationship. And the second client that sent you their entire life story before you've even sort of met them, said hello, or found out anything about them at all, they probably have a boundary issue in there somewhere. And you might find that consultation becomes more problematic on the ongoing. And you might like to, when you respond to that client, set very clear boundaries in your own terms, so that you set that for them, because they are obviously spilling out in terms of their narrative and their story that they're telling you all over the place. So that's a lot to tell, just from these initial contacts. Be conscious of the language. This is so key to relationship. You know we have certain predicate systems, so we tend to relate to people that have similar predicates to ours, whether they use feeling words. Oh, I feel, yeah, I really feel what you say, or I hear what you say, or I'm seeing exactly what you're getting at there. Just become conscious of those languages and the way that we relate. We basically relate to people that we feel are like us or that we can relate to, or that we have some connection with. So the predicate system is another way of just being conscious. And of course, words, thoughts, are how we spell our world into being. It is literally, that's why it's called spelling, because it spells everything into creation. So be conscious of the words, the language. Notice what language that your clients use when they're speaking to you, when they're communicating with you. You'll get huge amounts of clues as their relationship to their home, because home is metaphor of the self. There's nothing different going on here. So the first thing, like if I'm turning up at a consultation, the first thing I want to look at, remember, we're looking at that big picture scene. We're looking at the bigger chi. How does their home sit within its landscape? Is it on a desert island or on its own? Maybe beautiful and stunning, but perhaps they don't see too many people and they're quite internal and they don't really want to connect with anybody else. Or is it an oasis of beauty within a sort of industrial, toxic environment? What is that saying? What's their relationship with their external environment? Is that somebody that maybe thinks, well, I'm all right, it's just the rest of them? Just, be aware of these stories that people tell within their homes and their environmental setting. Does it sit in that wonderful traditional, armchair position, that form school? Does it seem to sit happy in the landscape? Is it comfortable? Is that building comfortable in the space? Or is it facing its back and not really wanting to look at anything that's going on? Is it unsupported from behind? Is it blocked in terms of its vision going forward? Just this very fundamental setting of the home will tell you, within its topography, will tell you an awful lot about that relationship with the client and their home, their story that they're particularly telling. So the first thing, once I've had a look at that topography and I've just kind of got a measure of the story that house or that building. Like, for example, if you're the top of a sky-rise, it's going to be a very different feeling, probably pretty ungrounded compared to somebody that's living deep in the basement. That, certainly in my experience, a lot of people that live in basement properties tend to have a lot of health issues. It's hard for them to stay physically well. There's a lot of dampness, heaviness. They're having to build an awful lot of chi to counteract that weight of the earth and the weight of that. But they may be quite internal. They find they get sluggish, they don't want to move too much, they find it hard to get out and about and things like that, and certainly a lot of health issues tend to come up in those spaces. And the very first thing that I do when I'm inside is I invite the client to introduce me to their home. And I invite the client to take me on a tour of their house. And this, for me and my practice, is the most important part of the consultation. Everything will kind of come from this. And I do take like a notebook or a piece of paper, so I can just, not that I'm like, here with my pad scribbling everything they're saying, but there will be things that you will observe. Where do they go first? How do they take you around their home? Do they go and show you the garden, the basement? Do they go straight to the attic, their bedroom? Do they start upstairs or downstairs? Does there seem to be a natural flow in the way they walk through their space? Or do they kind of get confused and go in one place and go, oh, let's go over here now, or oh, hang on, maybe we'll start upstairs, or, just be aware of what that flow of their, because remember, this is about their relationship to space, their relationship to their environment, their relationship to their story. Because people feel safe in their homes. They feel safe to express themselves. So their deepest, Simon talked about the unconscious self that we're not aware of. Well, within our homes, that's why Feng Shui works so brilliantly. Because we feel safe, we unconsciously put our stuff all around us. Through our artwork, through the placement of our furniture, through the colours we use, the way we express ourselves, that is the story, that is the narrative we build. So we don't do it consciously until someone like us comes in and goes, oh, by the way, we looked at that. And points it out and creates that sense of story for the person. They don't see it. That's the great bit of our job, is to be able to see that story for them. But that story's there, and it's out for anyone with the eyes to see, to be able to see it. So, inviting your client to take you around, notice how they describe their home. And, note to self, I had to do this for myself recently. I live in an absolutely wonderful house, but it is an old, crumbling house right now that I'm renting. And I started, people were going and go, oh, this house is amazing. And I'd go, yeah, but don't look too closely, it's falling to bits. And I thought, Davina, stop saying that. You really don't want to be falling to bits if you look too closely. And I certainly, being of a certain age, there are bits that feel like they're falling to bits. So I thought, really got to change that language. I need to describe my home much better. So it's a grand, wonderful, wonderful home. So just notice how they describe it, and ask them to describe, oh, what do you do in this room? How does it feel in here? Get them to tell the story. And then become aware of, also I always find out who is living in the home and what their relationships. So if they've got children, where are they in terms of eldest son, youngest daughter, middle daughter? Because that's not just, and are they? Where are those areas in the Bagua in terms of those relationships? And looking at where those relationships interact. Because just that family situation, without looking at necessarily the associations from an elemental point of view or directional point of view, just the family dynamics, you can garner a huge amount of information from looking at those family dynamics. It's like doing family constellations within the home. So are there clashes? Are there disagreements in those relationships that one can see? So if we're paying attention, by the time that client has done the tour, you'll pretty much know what their story is. You will have all of the information that you need in order to be able to effect a really good consultation in terms of helping that client work with their story to actually achieve. Because of course, it's all very well, but of course the reason they're calling you in is because they want to change that story. But until we become aware of our story, we can't choose to change it. We need the awareness first, because as Simon said, it's predominantly unconscious. We live these stories out all the time. Be aware, it's a very interesting thing for yourselves. When you do introduce yourself to somebody new, just become aware, what's the first story? you tell them about yourself. Like once you've got past the initial, yes, I'm this, that, and name, just you start to get deeper into that conversation, and you start, what's the story you choose to tell them? It'll tell you a lot about yourself and how you relate to your own personal self and your own personal psychology, to really become conscious of these narratives. We do it all the time, and it is mostly unconscious, but sometimes it's good to see what we're spelling into creation, to just become a little bit, step outside, take that bird's eye view, come out of the specifics. It's in the same way that I see it so much in the medical, particularly the Western medical profession these days. I had a client recently who came to me, he'd had emergency surgery for bowel cancer and ended up with a colostomy bag. And from somebody that somewhat has, for myself, that has a more holistic view, it was just horrific. So I was giving him some advice on diet and things he could do, and he said, oh no, I can't do any of that. I said, what do you mean? And he said, no, I've been given a diet to look after the stoma. I mean, so he was given a diet specifically to look after this small area here, in effect, right? Nobody had considered the fact that he was about to undergo horrific chemotherapy that's going to wipe out his immune system even more than the cancer already has, or that his bowels obviously needed some healing. No, it was like eat white bread, white pasta, Madeleine biscuits, no fruit, vegetables, or anything whatever, because of course that will not make the stoma work effectively. And then we need to give you drugs to make sure it keeps at the right consistency, etc. like that. There was no sense, it was so down, and that's where I'm just saying, the same thing with our Feng Shui sometimes. We can be so busy calculating, we forget to just step outside and take the eagle's view, that bird's eye perspective, and go, hang on a minute, how does this small bit here relate to that bigger picture? And sometimes I like to start from that macrocosm for me, and it's then from that view drilling down. I think we get far more complex layers of information, because if you start here, there will be a basic story. And that story will start to become very, very clear. And as we drill down, everything else you discover are basically going to be clues that confirm that story, or not. So maybe you've got the story slightly wrong and you need to adjust your calculations. But as you come down, everything, and then you get to, actually this is the perfect cure, and if we just move that here, that's going to be the linchpin that becomes like, you know, those best jobs, the best Feng Shui consultations are when you just maybe do one or two things, and it collapses the house of cards. It's like the dominoes, you pull out one and the whole lot go down. Because you found that linchpin by starting at the big picture and working and drilling your way down, where you see everything is layered on top of everything else, and every aspect and metaphor is adding to that story. There's one big story, one big metaphor that everything else just feeds into. It's all symbols of the same. Whereas if you start down there like that poor man with the stoma, if he's only looking after that, what's happening to the rest of him? It's not going to get well, because nobody's looking at that. And in this age of niche marketing and specialization, I think we need to become much more aware of this broader sense, this broader dialogue with what's actually occurring. So really be conscious of talking to the client, becoming aware of that relationship, and then gradually drilling down into seeing how the 5 transformations work within their home, how the use of colour and placement. And again, this is another thing that I really watch and am conscious of, is the relationship people have with the objects in their house. We've all seen those placements with those fireplaces where everything is separated on the mantelpiece, right, miles apart. Nothing's in relationship to anything. Right, just a slight adjustment, it can still have the same symmetry, because people are, oh yeah, but it's not symmetrical. It doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. But you can have 2 of things in symmetry one side and 2 of things, but suddenly they're related, and there is a relationship there that wasn't there before. We can not, I see at the time, you'll get lots of, I was in a house the other day that just had empty vessels, like vases, bowls, just tons of them, none of them had anything in. It's just like, and of course this woman had actually used to run, not enough, they've gone now, but she hadn't changed any of the emptiness. She had run a retreat for women that had lost babies, had miscarriages, terminations, anything, and she was supporting that work, and she just hadn't seen that over the years she had collected all these empty vessels, because the residue of that story was still within the space, and it's represented in the objects and the things that we start to collect around us, because the activity of that energy is in there. So this is all about, so just become aware of the story, the narrative, the relationship between everything, between you and the client, between them and their home. And my sense is that it will empower your ability to deliver fabulous consultations and also be able to shift the relationship that you have with your home. And we're going to do something a little bit similar and a little bit different to end this with, that Vicky took us through a meditation. I want you to just have an experience of this. So we're going to do a little journey to your own homes. And it's really good to do this when you're actually not in your home. To do it when you're away, because we're too close. We can't see the story when we're inside, so sometimes we need to extract ourselves and revisit, and then we start to see that story in a different way. So I'm just inviting you to maybe pop your pens and papers down for a minute and uncross your legs and arms. And if you feel it's okay to close your eyes. And just really feel the weight of your body on the chair, the soft, relaxed belly, soft, smiling eyes under closed lids, and soft, relaxed jaw. Becoming aware of the world inside your skin, within your boundary, as you allow yourself to relax a little more, a little deeper with each exhale. And finding yourself on the way home from this conference. You've had a fantastic weekend, inspired with new information from all these wonderful people delivering speeches for you. And so you're approaching, you've got off the train or out of the car, and you're approaching your home with new eyes. You're becoming aware, no judgment, no expectation, it is what it is. How does your home from the outside sit within its environment? Does it look comfortable and nestled in a nice comfy armchair? Or can you see that perhaps it's a three-legged stool, it's a bit wobbly, or something else entirely? It's becoming aware of how physical structure sits. How do you feel that it sits in relationship to the neighbours and the surrounding towns or streets? Is it on the high street, busy cars, nestled in the forest somewhere? Just becoming aware, no judgment. And then walking up to your front door, once more becoming aware of how you relate, where that front door is, whether it's easy to find, clearly signposted. Look inviting. Is it inviting you in with a sense of, oh, it's good to be home? Or does it seem to be pushing you away? Or feeling a little bit neglected? And opening your front door, the key in the lock, and opening the door, closing it behind you, and just pausing for a moment. How does it feel to be home? And if you could name that emotion, that energy right now inside yourself, what would it be? And now allowing yourself to explore your home. Notice where you want to go to now. The home, the room that you naturally gravitate towards first, becoming aware of who is there or what is there. Just taking yourself on a little tour, noticing as you walk across each threshold point, each doorway, the shift in energy, the change from one state to another. And standing in the center of each room and naming the energy. What's my relationship to this room? How do I feel here? Comfortable, warm, pushed out. Just naming it for yourself. Feeling what you feel, hearing what you hear, seeing what you see, and noticing what you notice. taking yourself all the way around, maybe putting your head up in the attic, down into the basement, walking outside into the garden if you have one. Making sure you have a full tour. Taking the time to notice what you notice. The doors and the flow of energy, is it easy? Cluttered? Is it exaggerated? What stands out? Becoming aware of colours, temperatures. And lying on your bed at some point, does it feel to be in that bedroom? Does it feel that you're going to get restful sleep? Or do you feel a little bit agitated, overstimulated? And then bringing yourself back down to the front hallway, just outside the front door, closing the door behind you, and thanking your home for the information it's given you. A chance to just have a little tune in, and walking back up the street and all the way back into the Wellesley Hotel, wiggling your toes and fingers, and just taking a deep breath, coming fully back into this space now. Did anybody notice something different, or a sense, or get any clarity, maybe something they haven't been fully aware of in the space before? Yeah.
Because I felt was pushing me back, surprisingly. I spent a lot of money.
Yeah. No, that's
a bit worrying, that.
Yeah, but so just ask yourself, in terms of the story, maybe something in life is pushing you back, as you say, so where else that story is occurring, what you can do to just change that relationship. Because everything, even the things that we learn sometimes in Feng Shui are wrong, are generally relative. Like, for example, Vicky gave a good example in her previous talk when she said you opened the door and there was a mirror there. So normally we think, because of course if you see yourself in a mirror, your natural reaction is to go like that. It's like, whoa, that's a bit much. So of course it pushes the energy out. But in that case it was tainted, so you couldn't see yourself. So there's no energy pushing out. Similarly, if, it's all relative, isn't it? If I open the door and there's a mirror there, it depends how far away. If it's at the end of that, sort of on the back wall there, then that's going to be fine. That's not pushing me out. It's actually inviting me in. So just be conscious of these different things. Don't take anything as dogma. In Feng Shui or anything else in life for that matter, always check your own narrative, your own relationship with, the own story that you're telling about it and with everything else.